Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Caleb Rothy. I'm the Percussion Education Coordinator for WGI Sport of the Arts, and this is our 2022 Percussion Community Webinar Series. This is our second one of these of the season, and I'm joined tonight with special guest Lindsey Schueller. Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited for whatever this conversation turns into.
Yeah, I can't wait to be able to dive in on a couple of these topics. We've got some questions outlined, but certainly want everybody that's attending live to be able to participate as well. So I think right off the top, we'll just get started with the basics and the fundamentals in this. Would you mind, Lindsey, just kind of giving us a quick rundown of your bio and your history in the activity, just a nice little overview so that those that don't know you real well will know a little bit about your backstory?
Yeah, sure. So I'll go all the way back because I always have a hard time, like when current students are like, "Oh, what instrument do you play?" I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question. I played the feet. I played the body. I don't know how to answer that because I went to a charter school for a minute that had like an after school kind of just see what it's about band. And I played trumpet for like all of 3 weeks and I was horrible. Like I could not even sustain a sound. Granted, I wasn't getting like a whole lot of good information to like help me do that, but like real bad. And so my sister played clarinet. And so I was just like, okay, I'm switching to clarinet because that seems like something I can do. So I tried that for a minute and it was marginally better. But then I switched schools to go to a different school in Michigan, and it was a public school, and they actually started band a year prior to when I arrived there. So I showed up and they had already had a full year of band, and I was just like, "Hi, I'm new. What can I play?" And so they were like, "Well, you played trumpet or clarinet a little bit, so probably one of those." And I was just like, I kind of like this whole percussion thing. I want to do that. And they were reluctant and rightfully so. Just a brand new, like random 12-year-old child showing up saying, I want to play that doesn't usually like, that's like an adult would say no. But they gave me a chance and I'm super thankful for that. So I did the concert percussion thing all through middle school, and I played quads for a marching band in high school. But like somewhere in the middle of high school was my first introduction to drum corps. And obviously I thought like everything percussion was cool, but I had never experienced like a brass section quite like that. And I was just like, I want to do that. Like, that seems so cool. Like how involved they are in the show, in the production of it. And they're playing like, this was like early 2000s when everyone is, still in, band uniforms and shakos and like, you're just like anonymous band member. So I just thought like their involvement was really cool and just like how powerful all of it was. And so I was just like, I want to learn how to play some brass. And this was literally my decision-making process as a 14-year-old. Trumpet, too high. Mellophone, too hard. Tuba, too big. I guess I'm gonna play baritone. And so I learned how to play baritone and audition for drum corps the following season, and that was when Blue Stars was making the jump from back then Div 2 to Div 1. And so I was part of the first year of Blue Stars in Div 1, obviously now world class. And it was just kind of like, it always felt like just right place, right time, because like I was horrible. I had just picked up this instrument that I didn't know how to play, and they were like willing to teach me as a person who was more visually minded. They were like, yeah, we'll teach you the music thing. And so, yeah, I did brass all through my drum corps career, which was 06, 07 Blue Stars, 08, 09 Blue Coats, and then 11, 12 Crown. And kind of in the middle of all of that, I heard word of a new indoor group coming out of my hometown in Michigan, Genesis. And that was kind of birthed out of the ending of GLP for those like old school folks. And so I was like, you know, I liked playing quads. It was cool and fun and all that, but I didn't love it enough to put that much effort and work into it. I much preferred the visual side to things. And so just kind of like barely watching everything, I was just like, you know, the cymbals seem like that's what they do. Like they're kind of like the horn line equivalent to the indoor scene. And so I just picked up some cymbals, and thankfully had really good teachers who were like, hi, you're brand new. You've marched 3 years of drum corps and you're starting on a new instrument. So here we go. So I ended up doing just 1 year marching at Genesis. And then the very next year was actually when I started writing drill and designing, which I was 19. They had no reason to say, okay, yes, we'll let this 19-year-old literal child like design a show, or at least help at that point. I wasn't fully doing everything quite yet, but after that, I just kept writing and designing, even though I was marching cymbals at Rhythm X 11, 12, and 13. So I was marching a world finalist champion group while writing and designing for an independent open finalist group, which always confused my parents. They were just like, oh, is Genesis competing against them? And I was just like, no, you don't get it. They really dug into drum corps stuff, but they didn't really quite understand WGI. And I was just like, it's fine, don't worry about it. But yeah, I think that's at least my marching history, which somewhat overlaps with the beginning of my teaching and designing.
Yeah, and I think you've teed that up right. We're going to talk about designing and all that stuff, and you've given us the little bit of like how you got started in it, and we'll figure out where things went from there in just a bit. Lindsey, before we dive into that tonight, there's one topic I want to talk to you about, which is your background as an audiologist. For those that don't know, that is what Lindsey's formal educational background and training is, and you actually worked as an audiologist for a while, and have kind of transitioned into this full-time designer realm and things like that. Can you talk to us a little bit about your background as an audiologist?
Yeah. So getting an audiology degree it's a doctorate, but it's a clinical doctorate, so it's not a PhD. I didn't really technically have to write like a dissertation or stuff like that. I had a capstone project and all of that, but it's not as elongated of a process as a PhD is. So yeah, I did that. Actually, my first year of grad school was my age out season at Rhythm X in 2013, which was a whole story of its own. A whole disaster sometimes of, you know, going to grad school in a different time zone than the ensemble I was marching. But either way, so I did the audiology thing, and my capstone project was actually could have been summed up in drums are loud. Could have been summed up just like that, but I had to prove it.
Sure, accurate statement. And now let's collect some evidence.
So I took a dosimeter, which it tells you how loud things are to like different ensembles in the 2015 season. So there was a couple different groups that I used, and I took like different levels of like how loud is a snare sectional, how loud is a battery ensemble, how loud is a full ensemble. And that was all from the front, which is actually the staff's viewing point. So I didn't I could have taken the route of like put that on a member of like, okay, you center snare, what levels do you hear throughout a rehearsal? But for a variety of reasons, I didn't want to do that. So at all the levels that I ended up taking are actually from a staff's viewpoint, which drums are loud. It is really all it comes out to, is like in every situation, drums are too loud. You need to wear hearing protection. So that's the big part of it. I mean, they're loud. You only, once you start losing parts of your hearing, you can't recover that. It's not like, hearing aids are not like glasses. Like, it doesn't correct your hearing. It just sort of helps it in different ways. So I was actually talking about this with some of the Q2 snare members. We went to the Orlando Regional, and then we went to Universal afterwards, and I found all of them just kind of hanging out together, and we were talking about that like I always worry about, are they wearing hearing protection all the time? Are certain people being more proactive about it because of other, reasons that they need to be? So I can't recommend that more. Like, protect your ears. Like, there are so many people, so many older folks in the activity who have felt the effects of that later on, where they're in their like mid 50s and they can't hear anything. And it's like, well, yeah, you've been listening to loud drums for most of your life. Your hearing as a teacher, as an instructor, as a designer, is part of your instrument, your ability to teach. Like, if you can't hear your kids play, how are you going to teach them? Like, it's not going to, you still can, but it's not going to be as effective. So you gotta be smart.
On that note, what would you share as some best practices in terms of hearing protection for performers, for staff members, which I think we don't talk enough about and think enough about? What are some best practices that we should all perhaps be doing?
Anytime you're playing, anytime the kids are playing, if you're in front of them, you're hearing the same things, essentially. I mean, minor differences, but it's just as loud. It's like, especially the Met can be a bad thing. Like, that's pointed straight at some people. Like, that could be pointed straight at your center snare. Are they protected in the same way? Is the front ensemble protected in the same way? So honestly, I think anytime, any environment. I know there's some folks who are like, oh, let's do it only when we're indoors and we don't need it if we're outdoors. But yes, it's a little bit less intense outdoors, but it's still not safe. So yeah, I think anytime that anyone is playing, just wear hearing protection. Even if it's the cheap foam plugs, like, those aren't great. They don't sound good. And I think that's part of the reason that a lot of players don't like to wear it, is because it really does like have an effect on how their instrument sounds to them. Mm-hmm. But that's more of a factor of, you have cheap, bad earplugs, right? So yeah, it's going to sound bad. If you invest a little more, there's other ways that you can protect your ears and not break the bank. That'll make your instrument still sound like you want it to, or like you're used to.
My experience, and I'd be excited to hear you say whether you think I'm like on the mark for this or not, is that the cheap foam stuff, it's better than nothing. We should use that at least as a basis, but I don't feel like I can hear real well with them. Right. I'm losing not an even amount of the frequency range. So those have never been great.
And that is 100% correct in your experience, and from like an audiology perspective, that is true. So there's Etymotic makes some really good ones that, like, they, instead, like, the foam earplugs drop like all the stuff that you kind of want to hear. Yeah. Like, it drops all of the high frequencies and leaves you all of the lows. Some of the slightly better, they're really not that expensive. They're really not. Those Etymotic ones are like $20, and they more evenly just drop everything. So you hear all of the same sounds, and even like if instructors are talking, you can still hear instructors talking. But it's just all quieter. And it's even better if you can get to an audiologist and get like custom ear protection. And then you can choose what decibel filter you want put in there. I have those and they're fantastic. I can hear everyone and everything around me. It's just quieter. So as a member, I wouldn't miss the box comments while having my earplugs in. I know that was something that I was annoyed with as a member, especially having cymbals on, is like, oh, I need to do something to like pull my earplug out. And now I've missed half of what is being said. So like eliminating any of that process by just having better equipment is good.
And I've talked with some instructors that have paid for the custom ear molded thing, like the, top of the line, most expensive. And a few of them have told me like, this is not better for them than some of the mid-range things that you were talking about before. So I think that's a good testament. Like, you don't have to break the bank and buy the most expensive thing on the market. You can buy mid-range, something better than the foam inserts, but not the custom molded everything, and get good hearing protection and still be able to hear your ensemble well. And if, as a performer, still hear what your instrument and those around you sound like pretty well.
And Etymotic offers like group discounts too. So it's like, if you're a part of any marching band, great. There's your group, there's your discount.
And there are some other like competitors out there. It doesn't have to be just that one brand, everybody.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Like if you're looking in that kind of price point, you're going to find
good. I know that's Erasers is a pretty popular brand going around now, and they're great. Yeah, there's loads of mid-range, not custom, but not foam, that are great options.
So my last question on this topic is, I think we know this, and I don't think that enough of us then actively do something about it. Like, it's in the back of our mind, and sometimes we're wearing hearing protection, and sometimes we're not. What are your views on, as instructors, what our role should be with the groups that we teach? Should this be kind of passive? Like, yeah, if some students want to wear hearing protection, they can, or should we be taking a more active role and talking to our students about that and encouraging them with some of those things? I see a lot of nodding. Take it.
That one for sure. And especially with younger groups, because at that point, they're just starting to formulate their opinion and idea of what their instrument sounds like to them. So like in the high school range, like I think that should be a non-negotiable, like, you are doing this. And obviously, as you get older, there's only so much you can truly enforce with literal adults. Like this year, we have actual like 23-year-old members in WGI. So like I can encourage, and I can give the reasons and resources, but like at some point it does kind of need to be on them. But I think the earlier that can be introduced as like, this is important and here's why, and then it's just, we do this. Not if you want to, if you feel like, because like they're going to forget, they're going to lose them. They don't like how it sounds. And it's like, well, you're 14. You don't get a choice in this.
Right.
We don't let our kids of that age choose if they're going to put their seatbelt on in the car.
Right.
So it's like, you don't get a choice on this either.
Right. And if you're on the high school football team, you don't get to choose to wear the helmet or not during the game. Like, that's the equipment that comes with doing this activity. So
right. Yeah, because it does get dangerously loud. And even for people who do it for not like a whole ton of time, that can have long-standing effects. And especially if there's other things going on. Like I've had members who only have hearing in one ear. Okay, well, let's say you lose the hearing in that one ear.
Right.
Now what? You're completely deaf. Yeah. Or, things like that, where like, it's like, this could have lifetime effects. So you need to be smart. So I think the more early instructors can emphasize how important and how not negotiable that is, I think that'll just continue, because then at that point that they become a little older and in the like independent part of things, they're used to their drum sounding that way with their earplugs in, and they prefer that sound where you don't hear all of this ringing, all of the overtones. That, yes, they sound great, but that's not what you need to be putting into your ears. It's not safe. It's just not.
Yeah, some excellent points, and hopefully, you know, something that those that are watching tonight can kind of take up with their ensembles, and we can take an active role in just starting this conversation and having it and helping students develop. We try to help them develop good habits in all facets of life. Protecting their hearing for the long run should be one of those things that we're helping to foster with whether they're, you know, scholastic performers or independent performers. It's something we can do with the students that are standing in front of us every day. So I appreciate you sharing that. Let's pivot a little bit. And I really want to dive in tonight on visual design and coordination and stuff like that, because I have a similar backstory to yours in that I started off in the activity as a performer, did that for a little bit. Then I started like teaching and writing at about the same age that you did, while I was still kind of like performing and things like that. But I was on the music side of things. Like that is my background is as a percussionist. And so then I started arranging from front ensemble and all that kind of stuff. I eventually did do some visual design, but almost by accident. So I think most of us that jump into this probably do it first as the musicians in the activity and are leaning towards the music route. And your backstory is so different from this. And I think it's an area that a lot of us that are probably watching this go, yeah, I feel more confident on the music side of the coin than I do the visual side of the coin in the activity. So what can I do to like round myself out on that a little bit? So I want to start with this, Lindsey. A ton of questions for you on this, but let's start with this. Who would you say are your influences in the marching arts? Who do you look up to? Who are you inspired by? It could be anything, but probably also in the visual realm as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, part of the reason that I marched certain places was because I wanted to be taught by certain people or taught their designs, their products. So like I went to Rhythm X really not being a great cymbal player, but I wanted to be a part of that group because I really liked the approach. I like what Tim Fairbanks and Tim Jackson put out year after year, and just the style and the nuance of all of that. And I wanted to learn from them, and cymbals was my way to do that. So it was just like, I got to get really good at cymbals so that I can do this other thing that I'm a little bit more passionate about. And I was always really thankful that I had that kind of like foresight as a member, that like while I was there, I was like hyper focused, zoomed in on what they were doing and what they were saying, because like that's why I was there. So I know a lot of people are just like, oh, I'm here to have fun. I'm here to do the social thing. I'm here to be good at my instrument and all that. But I was just like, I want to do this for the rest of my life, and I need to learn from you right now. So I was always really thankful that like I had that foresight at that age. And it was kind of the same thing for drum corps, honestly. Like obviously Crown Brass is known for playing brass really well, like do all the hard things, run around, be amazing at brass. But some of the visual folks there were like really, really intriguing and inspiring to me, that like I was just like, well, I guess I got to get really good at baritone because I want to be a part of this for the visual people, but I also need to be really good musically. Like they won't let me in here if I suck at my instrument. So Andy Ebert was there. He was the caption head at the time that I joined. And so he, an amazing visual designer, even though he wasn't in that role at Crown while I was there. I just wanted to learn from him and how he approached things. And then obviously Leon May is one of the best drill writers out there. And he was writing for Crown at the time that I was there. So like being able to be around that and see what he's doing and why and how, and just that whole process was a big part of the reason that I went there. And then as far as like some of my teaching ideas, I actually was taught by Ron Harden and his crew at all 3 drum corps that I marched. It totally not on purpose. Like we weren't following each other. We all just kind of like ended up at the same place. Yeah, they were at Blue Stars in 07. And then we all went to Bluecoats in 08 and 09. Then I took a year off in 10 and they stayed at Bluecoats. I went to Crown in 11 and that's where Andy Ebert was. But then they went to Crown where I was aging out in 12. And so it was just like, oh my God, they literally saw me through my entire drum corps career.
Sure.
They first met me when I could not drive a car. And then, you know, learning from them throughout all of that time and then teaching with them a little bit in 2013 was just delightful. So I think those folks are my biggest like influences and pulls, just because I liked what they did and specifically sought them out for what they did.
I love that. And I love where your background is grounded in kind of the affiliated marching arts. I'm wondering specifically for indoor percussion, you talked a lot about your background at Rhythm X. Obviously that's very applicable, but also your background in drum corps. How would you say some of those experiences have influenced you as a visual designer, specifically for this medium, for the indoor percussion activity? Kind of pulling all of your experiences together.
Yeah. It's hard because it's so much that it's hard for me to like pinpoint exactly what, when, like who said what that inspired me to do this, that pulled from that, you know. Yeah, it's so many things. Because like there's so much that I learned from like the Rhythm X crew about like phrase development, like how to create interest through motion. And then like I think specifically from Leon, like how to like create focus and those sort of things, like all of those little things. Like I feel like I'm a mosaic of a lot of those people, so it's hard for me to pinpoint exactly what and where, but it's there.
Do you feel like it all translates to indoor percussion, or do you feel like there are some things that translate better and other things that are like, this works over here in this realm and it doesn't apply so much here?
Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be, marching band and drum corps is a larger stage. The field's just bigger. So there's certain things that you can do there that you can't do indoor or vice versa. But a lot of the principles still apply. In different ways, but they're still there, of like, you know, the motion, the focus, you know, all of that, like sort of like basics of visual design are still there. It's just a different stage. It's a different scale. And obviously a different number of performers, and a little bit, you know, now that that drum corps folks have been like removing shakos and it's a little bit more of a personable performance. I think some of indoor stuff now applies in a different way to outdoor stuff that it didn't previously.
Yeah, historically. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I think everything cross translates, like even like winds to percussion. You can kind of, they have similar things that relate, or like percussion to guard, like everything kind of has some similar design through line, but like how it's approached just has to be different based on what the medium is. Like you can't treat flags like snare drums. You can't treat trumpets like bass drums. Like they are fundamentally different, but the design and how you approach it can have some similar thoughts and ideas.
I mean, we have two things on our visual sheet: the principles of design and the elements of design. That's true no matter what the visual medium is. It's true if you're going to paint on canvas, and our activity is the same thing. But at the same time, moving as a member of the color guard and moving with bass 5 are two totally different things that are going to manifest themselves differently on the floor and be absorbed and read by the audience in two different ways. So the rules have to be a little different in both of those domains. Just what you can do physically with the equipment that you have is different. I love it. you have had a hand in designing some of my favorite shows over the last 5-6 years. Some of the things that I think have been like the most crafty and inventive and have come to the floor. And we always look at our world-class ensembles as pushing the envelope and kind of setting the standard. But you've done some really interesting work with A-class ensembles and with open class ensembles.
I
So
love
I want to
A
pick,
and open. I love, like, don't get me wrong. I love world class too. Been there. I love it. It's a different animal. But A and open is where my heart's at. And I don't know if I can quite explain it. But I mean, it's, yeah, just because the skill set is a little different doesn't mean it's less. It doesn't mean that it's uninnovative.
sure.
You don't have to be like just like Square. We do this box show and yay, a class. Like you can do some really cool things that still fit within that beginner skill set, but are still really interesting. Like in 2019, I was working with a group, Grand Blanc High School up in Michigan, and we were doing a show called Mute. And it was kind of funny to me at the time because I was just like, wait, so we're doing a drum show about not playing? Like the thing that we're here to do, we are not gonna do.
Sure.
But that's part of what made it really interesting, of like, because you're not playing as much, everything you do play matters that much more. One of my absolute favorite times teaching anyone anything was this like silent choreography feature, I guess, that the battery was doing. There was no sound coming from anyone, anything. And once we learned the choreography, we put like sounds that the battery members made, like it was, you know, like breath sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it became this like really honed in, intimate moment. It wasn't hard, but it was exactly what the show needed and exactly what the members could perform. And it's like, yes, that's what A-class is. And it doesn't have to be uninteresting to be A-class.
Right.
You can do really cool things.
It's got to be solid. It's got to be sound. It has to be principled. It's got to be, grounded in the right vocabulary and concepts, but you still need to move the audience. You still need to make a connection. You still need to have something where they go, I really like that. I want to see that one again.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that pushes you as a designer to go, look, I don't have the raw ingredients that I might with a world-class group, where the performers are going to engage you no matter what, because that's who those performers are. So how else am I going to make a connection with the audience? Am I going to do that through design? Am I going to do that through costuming? Is it production, value in this? Is it going to be the repertoire that we choose on the music side? Like, how are we going to do this? Because we're still going to have to use basic ingredients to make that connection.
Yeah, it makes me just think that much more about Q2, Atlanta Quest's affiliate open class group. And I work with them primarily, and I love it. Like it's my favorite group to teach. And I've had people be like, oh, well, don't you want to work for Atlanta Quest? Like do the world class thing? And it's like, well, I kind of don't. Like, I really like the group of members and teachers and kind of what we're crafting there, that it's like, I don't need to be in the world class conversation to be doing great things.
Right.
Like I don't need that. And that's kind of stretched me in other ways too, where it's like, I don't necessarily have access to the absolute 100% best players, absolute 100% best performers. So like, how can we elevate them in a way that works? Like last year, the virtual season with Q2, we put water all over the show. We had pools full of water, and we had like jets shooting water up that coordinated with the show. And that was just like, that was worked into the show. It was just, yes, it's a gimmick, but it's a cool thing to like be like in everyone's head of like, oh, that's a really cool thing.
And with an idea like that, it can very easily become the signature for the group, which doesn't
Sure,
always have to be
exactly.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
we did the
You become
hardest
memorable.
thing you've ever
Yes.
seen. No, we just did something creative that you hadn't seen
Yeah.
before. That was our signature. That's what you'll
Yeah,
remember.
and this year's version of Q2, we have a really kind of memorable prop that the members are actually wearing. I've nicknamed them jetpacks because I just don't know what else to call them. They're essentially a pyramid that they wear like a backpack, but those have the show is called The Weight We Carry, and it's the weight part is in the title is actually spelled W-A-I-T, like weight, but so it's kind of the play on like heavy versus pause, but like those are a super memorable prop. Like you don't see drummers wearing things besides their drum typically, and in addition though they're like super shiny, like really eye-catching, but they also have words on them. A lot of the members themselves picked those words that like, what is the weight that you carry? And they submitted the words that they want, they themselves are carrying around in their lives. And so they are actually physically carrying those things like grief, depression, anxiety, isolation, expectations, regret, that you see that like it's a physical manifestation of those emotions. But being such a unique prop, it's been kind of a little bit of a talking point of like, oh, I can actually see it. And you don't see any of those words when you're facing the members, because just as you and I are sitting across from each other, I don't see the weight that you carry. I don't know what you're carrying in your life. You might not know what I'm carrying in my life. But when you turn to the side and you can see the words and you look slightly differently, you can see those things. And so that's been a really cool part of this show of just like, and connecting the membership with it too, because like, it's their word. Like, I don't know what that means to them. I'm not meant to know what that means to them, because they can put that in their performance. And it's an intermediate skill set. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're not trying to be world class. Like, we can be strong and successful in open and still provide a great experience, a great show. It just, different classes don't mean less. It's just different.
It's just different. Yep. Different expectations, different ingredients used to put together a program, but still, yeah, it's got to be an engaging program that the audience wants to see over and over again. Yeah. All right. My next question for you. As primarily a visual designer, somebody that geeks out on that aspect of the activity, what's something that you wish every music person knew about or better understood about working with a visual designer? I imagine you work with a bunch of different music designers that help put together shows, and they have this great idea, and then they're coming to you to help bring the visual aspect of this to life. What's something that you wish all of us music people, myself included, better understood about working with a visual designer?
I think the most petty one is, please put measure numbers in your score. I'm so sick of like turning to a new page and it's like, okay, let's measure 42. Great. Okay. That means letter K is 42, 43, 44, 45, 40. It takes so much time. Please put measure numbers on every single measure. Thank you. But I think I
want to highlight one thing on that. It wouldn't matter if we were in the concert hall at all.
No.
But as soon as you're trying to stage a visual aspect with the musical score, those little details are really important. You got to think about like not just writing for the idiom. Like, I'm just worried about the battery playing through this. We just need to get from D to E in the score. Like, that's not helping the visual team out as they're trying to stage this and come up with count sheets.
Yeah, and especially for groups that I'm not physically there with, where I can kind of do some of that translation to the membership while we're learning it. Like, if someone else is teaching my drill, then it's like they need to know where all of this lines up and they need it quick. And so like, I need measure numbers. But on the like a little bit more real part, I think there's this like perception that visual can take less time to design than music. And I think that might, if that's true, it's because visual designers have long been put in a position where they have to work fast, not because they're better at it, but because they have to. Like there's so many marching bands where like the music person is taking like 5 months, and it's like, hey, write the drill.
Right.
It's like,
band camp starts in 12 days. We need the whole opener.
Yeah, that like, if I said that to you as a music person, hey, we need the whole opener in 3 days, go. Like, that's not fair. You're not going to get the best work out of that person. Like, it's just that it doesn't work. It shouldn't work like that, but often it does, because the music people just take their time and do everything. And then it's like, okay, surprise, go. We just got our numbers. We need our drill by tomorrow.
Right.
And it's like, well, you can get some drill. It might not be the best version of what you want. So I think, I don't know exactly where that perception is rooted from. Like, is that like, do people, which I've kind of heard some of this in passing, like, do people view visual things as less important, or a less educated version of our activity? Because I don't have a degree in marching visual design. It doesn't exist.
Sure.
You know, there are people who have degrees in composition, in percussion performance. And so I think there is that perception of, well, I am and you are, so just figure it out. And thankfully I haven't met too many people who like overtly display that opinion, but I think some of that still exists, and we don't get the same amount of time and care to do our art. Like, a lot of people think of drill as like, oh, it's math and geometry and numbers, and it's like, not really.
I mean,
it's
right.
really not. Like, it's way more of like painting with people than it is geometry. Like, sure, yes, I do know off the top of my head what numbers can make a square and make a triangle, and you know, yes, because those things come in handy, but that's not what it is. So I think there's some potential like misconceptions about what visual design is or can be. And I love that a lot of colleges want their music ed folks to go through a Pieware course, so that they at least have some experience of trying it out. And and maybe at that point they realize like, oh wow, there's actually a lot more involved than they think. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would want music people to know and understand, is we're just as much creatives and artists as music people are. It's just a different medium. You're making art with sound. I'm making art with visual things, people, space.
And I think, and this is just some of my experience, I think a lot of this is a function of just running behind all the time. I think a lot of our activities do that, where just nothing is happening on the schedule that we had in mind. I will say for myself as a designer, my groups got way better once I got organized with timelines and was realistic about like, if I want this done here, I can't start it here. My timeline needs to back up more than that. And so the better I got at managing that and going, okay, by this date, this has to happen. We have to be at this checkpoint on this date. I stopped delivering music late. I stopped putting, my co-collaborators that I was working with that in a bind where like, we have to stage things on Saturday, but you're not going to hear the music that I wrote until Friday night. And hopefully you can stage some good things on set. Like, that's just not a way to do this. So for anybody that's looking to get better and to improve your working relationship with co-collaborators, a lot of it's about time management and production schedules and just getting on top of things and not letting yourself fall behind and say, oh, I'm behind again. Well, we can do better than that. We should do better than that for our kids.
Yeah. And like, in terms of the like usual design team folks, the drill writers are usually the last to get all of the necessary bits and pieces. But even after that, and usually ignored, quite honestly, is the fact that the guard in like marching band and drum corps folks, they can't really like viably write good work until they have the drill. And so they're even later than what we consider in the design world the potential last stop. So there's just so many ramifications to all of the being late.
And I think, you know, holistically, we've gotten better at that, but maybe not everybody has gotten as much better at that as they could. I'm not going to say, like, I don't want to should a bunch of people, but we could take more strides in this realm just to try to even it out a little bit more everywhere. Hey, Lindsey, Jose shared a question that I want to pose to you right now. Jose is teaching a group, and the performers right now are not showing the same desire and passion as what he wants them to have. So he's wondering, what are some things that he can do that helps to break his performers, out of monotony and get them out of their comfort zones a bit more, and, you know, basically hype them up and get them into this and break free from where they are and move them where he wants them to be. Do you have any tips? Do you have any experience in your years doing this?
I think oftentimes like performing for each other can be a good way to kind of help them kind of show off, because they want to perform well for their peers. No matter what, they want to look great for their friends. So, I mean, that could be like, okay, snares and basses are in on this chunk, and quads and cymbals, you're going to watch them to make sure that they're engaging and interesting and, you know, not just like flat face, I have a mask on sort of a performance. And sometimes that peer communication can go farther than an instructor really could, because they're going to listen to their peers. And if their peers are saying, hey, you did great in this chunk, but then you started looking down once you started moving, and then I wasn't as interested, they'll be like, oh wow, shoot, I had no idea, and I you know, want to be better. Or like having those kids see those things happen in their peers will make them realize like, oh shoot, I do that too, and what that looks like and how unengaging and uninteresting that can be. And so that can be part of the conversation of like, okay, you remember when Johnny was looking down while he was moving and then got in late to the hold? Well, here's why and how we need to fix that. And then in terms of like, just from a programmatic standpoint, I mean, if there's any way to relate the show thematically to their lives, what they're doing, it just creates another level of why they would care about the show specifically. Not even just the activity, but just that show. And then if you want to get people a little more interested in just the activity as a whole, I mean, there are some really good, fun shows out there. Maybe they aren't the gold medalists.
Yes.
Maybe they didn't make finals, but they are really good, engaging shows that are super interesting and fun for the kids to watch. Like I think of that 2013 Minnesota Brass, when they had that flower and they were like the weed whacker.
Yes.
I think they barely squeaked into finals, but they were like the talk of the town. And it's like, you can't just look at the medalists for inspiration, because sometimes that feels inaccessible to some younger members, where they see these people doing what they consider impossible. So how can you bridge that gap? There's some really, really good A-class shows that are probably closer to their skill set, where they perform really well and they're playing those basic skills, but they're doing it at a really high level. So I think finding some really engaging, interesting shows could be a way to just up their interest level.
I think that's great advice. And I want to piggyback on that, Jose. I've got Lindsey knocked it out of the park with this. I'll share with you two things that I used to do that are in kind of the same vein. I would also do the thing where I'd have some performers come out and watch the ensemble, just as Lindsey was describing. And one of the practices that I did with performers was, don't just watch, but I'm also going to ask you what you noticed afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes them start to become assessors themselves. They're self-evaluating, they're peer evaluating. They're starting to kind of look at themselves through the lens of like a judge or an audience member. And so I would tell them, like, after a run, everybody come out here, watch the snares do this. And I'd ask a couple of people, give me 2 things that you think they did really well. We always start with a positive. We start with something that's an affirmation. And then give me 1 area that you think could have been a little bit better. And the insight that they have about their peers is sometimes so much better than I could even articulate it. And so giving your students a chance to assess each other and then talk about it makes the whole makes the performers strive to do more for each other rather than for me all the time. And so that's hugely powerful. And then, just as Lindsey was saying, I would try to do movie nights with my ensemble every once in a while, where we would sit down and we would try to watch some shows. This was easier back in the DVD days, but you can still find a lot of shows and performances on YouTube and things like that, where you get together and you watch, like Lindsey said, that Minnesota Brass show, and everybody like just watch it. And then you can do the same thing. What did you like about it? What did you notice about it? What did you notice about it? So they start to get that critical eye for what in a performance connects with the audience. What does the audience really like and respond to? And now can you, bring that into your own performance and the way that you're bringing your show to life and communicating and making connections and all those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great stuff. Thank you, Lindsey. So, Lindsey, I want to talk to you a little bit about growth and development. Like, how do we get better in all of this stuff? So I want to start with this question first. There are a lot of ensembles out there that will have kind of a small staff. There's maybe just 1 or 2 people, and they're kind of like running the whole thing. Back when I started, there were just 2 of us, and we did everything with the group.
Been there.
So imagine a scenario where you've got a couple of staff members, and they're wearing multiple hats, sometimes all the hats. For those in that boat that may have more of a primary music background, but they want to get better at the visual side of things for indoor, what advice might you have for them?
I mean, I think providing, especially for young ensembles, providing as much structure as possible. Like, it's fine to treat it similar to marching band. Like, you have a grid out there. You are meant to hit these dots, something tangible for them. So it's not just like, okay, now you're in an arc. Well, Johnny's gone today. So do I like fill that whole, something tangible for them to like really hang on to, something super concrete, like this is your job. That's it. And then as far as like the designing and maybe even adding choreography in, I mean, just watching it's very similar to some of the students, like just watch. Be an active learner of the activity. It's okay in those early years of what you're doing to literally take something that someone else did and kind of just apply it to what you're doing. Like, they went down to a plie, and then they turned their leg in, and then they stood up, and then they turned around. That's totally fine. And as you go along, then you can start to learn, like, why is that appropriate? Okay, yes. They turned left versus right. Why does that matter? Like, the focus went here because of, like, you can start to like get those ideas. But I think just watching and dissecting, like, not just watching for enjoyment, because I think that's a totally separate thing. Like, there's shows that I watch and enjoy, and then there's shows that I want to watch to like study, like a scholar of. So I like, okay, why did I watch the quads there? What did they do that drew my eye there? Where was everyone facing? Where was everyone looking? I mean, wearing the drums limits some of what you can do with your body. It just does. You can really only do so much with your upper body, like a little bit of spine shape, sure, but like the majority of what you're going to be doing is going to be legs and head and facing. So how can you use, though limited, how can you use those tools to convey your concept, can like make sure your focus is clear. Do you see what you hear? Like I all the time, I watch shows on mute. I don't want to hear any of the drumming. I know what it sounds like because I've listened to it a lot. I don't need to hear it anymore, but I'll watch it on mute and it's like, okay, where is my eye actually going? If I'd never heard their music, would my eye be where it's meant to be? Why? How did that process happen? Is there enough velocity when there's velocity in the music? That sort of a thing. Just as musical phrases develop, so do visual phrases. Visual phrases are just as musical as the music is. And does that match, or does it purposefully contrast?
And I love a couple of things that you said in here. One of those was watching the show on mute. We've talked about that a bunch of times in the activity. Since the first time you've heard it, then like you just struck gold, because that's one of the best ways to get better at visual is to.
I know music people do that the opposite. Like they don't watch the video and only listen.
Yeah.
So it's like, why wouldn't you do the other way too?
But I think so many of the times, for those that wear multiple hats, and I did for a long part of my career, you start to go to your bag of tricks for how you're going to do things. So if I want to direct your attention over here, I do it with sound. And that started to become a liability, because then everything that we're designing is one note. We're not using a variety of ways to do that. And when you start to watch the program with the sound off and you go, well, how are you going to pull the eye around the floor if there's not the new sound coming from the tenors there? What visual cue can you put in to draw everybody's attention there that isn't sound? It makes you twice the designer immediately once you start to look at things through that lens. If I heard nothing, what would visually pull me through this work of art right now? And is the focus always where you want it to be? Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned, Lindsey, is, and we talk about this in sports all the time, right? They'll say a player is a really good student of the game. And for that, you think about this player that is studying how the game works, rather than relying on like raw physical tools. And I think from a professional development standpoint, you're exactly right. We got to do the same thing in our activity, where if you become a student of the activity, that means you're watching sometimes for enjoyment, but other times you're watching, trying to dissect something. Yeah. How did this
more times than not, it's dissecting.
Like, how did this get put together in this show? Let me watch it back, or let me go to the regional live and watch it. Not to enjoy the shows, but to like really pay attention to how everything is crafted. And so if you find like a hole in your game where, you know, your transitions to getting people behind flats or behind a prop becomes very predictable every single time, and there's no sleight of hand, go watch others that are good at it and go, I know that they're about to go behind those props, but where am I looking while that's happening?
Yeah, what is happening otherwise?
Right. How did they do that? That's the answer to getting better at a lot of these things, is reverse engineering what the masters are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like magic tricks aren't the trick, it's the lead up to. Yes. So if your build is correct, your event will be fine. But the build is the most important part. Like the penultimate note is the most important note. The resolve is gonna happen.
Right.
You got to get
where's the chord right before the resolve taking us? That's
and like I've been talking just forever. Like I like to teach in a way that gives the students the understanding of why and how. And so I'll talk about some of the stuff like that, where like you have to hit the set before the set that you think matters. This one matters more, because if you don't hit this, nothing else will transition right. And it's the exact same thing. Like if you don't get that chord before the resolve in tune, the resolve isn't going to sound right. And it's the same thing visually. If we don't get the set before the resolve, it's not going to be right. So yeah, we talk about some of that stuff. And I wish I could be in some of my students' brains of like, are they picking up on this? Are they digesting this? Or are they just like, Lindsey, please shut up? Like, I don't know. I'm sure.
I'll say it's a little bit of both. Through my years of experience, sometimes they really care, and other times they're like, would you please stop talking at me?
Yeah.
Let me do this again.
That was something that I had an interesting conversation with Mike Hubner. He was my drum major at Bluecoats in 2008. And then he joined on with the Ron Hardin visual team. And so he knew me when I was 17. And then also when I went to Crown and was about to turn 22. And he asked me one day, he was like, what are your thoughts on how the visual team has changed over all these years? Like, you've known them forever. And I was like, I can't answer that because I've changed along with them. I have no idea, because they might have like told me some like nugget of amazing information when I was 17, and it went like over my head, and I just didn't catch it because I wasn't ready to. I wasn't mature enough. And then that nugget hits me when I'm 22, and I'm just like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me that when I was 17? Yeah. It's like, no, I did, but you weren't ready to take that and digest it. So I always think that some of that stuff is interesting. It's like, you could be taught by the most amazing person in the world, and if the kids are not like in the right mental space to get the information and immediately understand how it applies and where and why and how, they might not get it.
Yeah. And also it takes a while. I mean, there's a reason that we teach like US history 3 times in our K-12 education. You're not ready for all of it at first. And we're going to keep layering in greater complexity and depth of understanding every time we revisit this topic. It's the same thing in the marching arts. It's the same thing.
It is. And some of that stuff I find really fun in the open-ish skill set and age range, because you typically, like, the skill set really does range all the way from like A class plus to like world minus. And so how do you keep that large skill set engaged? Mm-hmm. Like you're barely got out of A class kids are only going to get some of that surface layer stuff, but you're almost going to be in world-class performers are going to be bored by just that. So how do you reach different membership levels at different points, but still have that unity of a full ensemble? I find some of that stuff like really interesting. And like I make a point to like really get to know a lot of the members that I teach. Like almost everyone that I taught at Legends, I know their name, I know their hometown, I know whether they went to college, I know their major, like I'm getting in there. So like, I know you, and I know what you can do, and I know kind of where your limits are. And so I had a lot of fun in 2019 at Legends. We had this large group that had been with us for like 3 years, like all of them together. And they were just a little bit more advanced than the rest of the ensemble. And so I was kind of posing different challenges to them to like really keep them engaged. And that's something that I really enjoy doing, because then that creates different meaning for people who are still performing at a high level in that same ensemble with other folks who are barely hanging on, because those people do exist. So how do you cater to that wide range?
Right.
You know, you can't just talk to your soloist. You can't just talk to your kid who's struggling. Like, how do you get everyone and everyone in between?
Right. How do you meet the needs of all the performers in front of you, knowing that everybody has a unique set of needs? It's a great question, and something I think we always have to remind ourselves of as we're going to work every day, as we're stepping in front of our ensembles. I'm wondering, for those that are watching this and are hearing you and saying, man, this sounds awesome, I want to blaze a similar trail to what Lindsey has done. For those that may want to become a visual designer themselves, maybe they're even in the activity and they're watching this video now, what tips do you have for somebody that is looking to blaze a similar trail as you have done?
I mean, everything for me started from teaching. So there was an indoor group that I was teaching that needed a little bit more of a like choreography based ballad. And so because of that, I did the staging for that ballad and the choreography. And then whoever was like writing our drill picked up from where I left off. And something similar kind of happened in marching band realm. So like I was there and willing and able to, like, if something needed to be restaged, if we need to just like change something around a little bit, like just being a present person kind of gave me a lot of the opportunities that ended up becoming more than that. And so from there, it was just kind of like trial by fire. Like I was there and writing and kind of figuring it out as I went along. And I was always very, thankful for the time it all happened in my life, because I was still marching. Yes, it was a lot, like especially writing for marching bands while marching Crown. That was a lot, because our buses back in the day didn't have outlets. And so I could write as long as my computer battery lasted. And so what that did for me is it forced me to like really think about what I want to write before I even open the laptop.
Yeah, because time's limited.
The blank page is so threatening. You don't know no one knows what you want to do with a blank page. Like,
every time.
What do I do? Or a blank score, anything that's like you're trying to start a paper for college and you're just looking at like the cursor blinking and you're like, I don't know what to do. And so what that did is it forced me to figure out what I want long before I'm present with having to write it. And so I got to sketching, and I sketched a lot. I would draw things out. And what that did is it forced me to think about what motion do I want? What focus do I want? What shape, what density, what space, and didn't because it's easy to be like, well, let's just put everyone on a yard line. There's a yard line. Let's put them on the yard line.
It's right there.
Yeah, you don't have to. And so it like got me out of the like marching band grid and put me more into honestly, line art is really what it turns into. And so like that sketching process forced me to just know what I want beforehand. And that helped a lot. So because I didn't have an outlet available, I became a better writer, like that sort of thing. So like, I always recommend sketching to people, or taking like a show that musically is already written and you already have, let's say you have the best student numbers possible. Like you have 16 trumpets and 8 mellophones and everything is perfect. No prime numbers to be seen. Write that show. You already have the music. You already know thematically what it's going to be. There's no consequence. You're not going to ruin some kid's high school career by writing some bad drill. So sketch it out, literally pencil and paper. What do you want to do? Can you start to see how things move? And then how does that translate to Pieware or InVision or whatever your mode of writing is? That's like a separate process. Like creativity and input are different things. And at least for me, at least until I got more comfortable with the software where it wasn't a separate process. Like I can open Pieware now and do exactly what's in my head, but that was not the case for 6 or 7 years. Like it took a long time to do that. And then also being able to stage things in person. That was, I started doing that a lot for indoor, smaller groups. Cause there's just less people. Mm-hmm. So you really shouldn't be setting, 120 marching band, person by person, but you could do that for indoor. So then that's almost like a real live version of drill writing software. Sure. You can see Johnny, the snare player, goes 2 yard lines that way. You can see how fast that is. You can see what that looks like. Okay, the snare line rotates this way instead of that way. What does that look like? Where does that open space? And can kind of give you different ideas that way. So there was a good chunk of time, especially for indoor, that I would write out some phrases. I would write out A to B in Pieware, and then I would stage in person B to E. And just kind of do almost like a hybrid version. And just kind of, that's what worked for me. I don't think there's any good one way to do things, but it all rooted with being there and available and teaching and just being aware and present of the needs of the ensemble and how you can best suit that. I mean, there's plenty of small, like scholastic AAA drum lines who would love someone with some amount of experience to come in and do their thing, or a small, only goes to local competitions marching band that would appreciate someone with a higher level of experience and knowledge to just come in and do their thing. And that's, in reality, that's what I did. And didn't really start working with bigger groups until much later. Like, I really honed in on what I wanted to do and kind of my voice with those smaller groups. So then by the time I was with anyone else, I could present myself as, here's who I am, here's what I do, here is my style, essentially.
That's excellent. And that kind of leads us right into a question that we got from Jacob. He sent this one in and said he was fortunate to be able to write and design his first indoor percussion show for this current season. And like you, he's getting started early. He's 18 right now. He just graduated high school. His big question is, do you have any advice for getting more clients in the future and tips for networking and all of that side of things? Beyond just the, like, I want to get better at this and I'm a student of the activity and all that. How do I actually find work and people that are willing to hire me to do this?
Word of mouth is the best way. Like, yes, anyone can make a website and anyone can market themselves in that way, but whether it's like legit, true or not, will come from people say you're good when other people say you're good. So being good at what you do, being successful, being a good teacher, being a good mentor, being a good role model, being communicative, like all of those good professional things will only help you. And then, I mean, most states or regions have a local circuit. So what other ensembles are in a similar situation that you could potentially chat with, meet up with, even if that's not in the same like design capacity just yet, but maybe if that's like a group that's in a different class where you're just a tech, you're just out there to clean things, you're not designing anything, but you're there. You're learning from the other people who are there, and then like expanding that network within your region can be really good and go a long way. And I mean, most of those are scholastic groups that happen to also have marching bands.
Yeah.
So if you're writing for a group's indoor group, you could ask, can I write for your marching band too? I'd like to make this a year-round commitment. And that way you're showing good faith towards the organization, the school, and showing that you're committed to whatever they're doing, and that benefits you as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. The only other thing I would add on this, Jacob, is to just start small. I think Lindsey kind of touched on this a little bit. Find a place to get started. Do great work there. Yes. Find somewhere else that you can also work, maybe in a similar capacity, maybe in a different capacity. Like she said, drill designer over here, and over here I'm visual tech number 12, but it at least gets me meeting some other people in the activity, networking a bit that way. And then when a vacancy crops up, hey, so-and-so, their drill rider's not going to do it this year, you can say, I would love this opportunity. And so just being there, the right person in the right place at the right time, is how a lot of people get gigs in this activity. And so it's those two things. When you get an opportunity, do a great job, knock it out of the park, do your best work, be humble, and all of those things, be gracious, and people will seek you out. And while you're working towards that goal, network, meet a bunch of people, and make sure if an opportunity presents itself, you seize that opportunity, because you never know how that will lead to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing.
Yep. Almost good thing.
Lindsey, I want to close out tonight by talking a bit about women in indoor percussion.
Sure.
And these are two questions that were sent in that I want to pick your brain on. The first one is, what are your thoughts on why a majority of our female performers in the activity do not continue on as instructors or designers?
I think there's a lot there. There's a lot of reasons. I mean, in general, there aren't as any female performers in the battery. I mean, they're just, the numbers wise, there are just less, for a variety of reasons. At the high school level, are they dissuaded from playing percussion because it's a boys instrument? Are they pushed into the front ensemble because the guys carry the drums, or it's a little too physical, or they don't have the body type for it? I mean, it's been a literal fight to get harnesses that fit female bodies, or like how to manipulate that. That's been hard. So there's just fewer people to pull from. And I think there's a lot of strong male voices that get highlighted, as performers, as young designers, as young techs, that it can often seem that there isn't a space available. And so sometimes you just kind of have to carve your own space. And some people want to do that. Some people really, really don't. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a good single answer, other than making sure that you're encouraging everyone who's a student of yours, of anyone's, to just be amazing, be themselves, come as you are, and do your thing. I mean, I think it was, it doesn't matter what year it was. It was some year. WGI did this like Facebook like Women Crush Wednesday post of like, tag some female instructors you've had in your life, and I was just like, over 6 seasons of drum corps and 4 marching seasons of indoor, like those were my performance opportunities, not even including high school, which wouldn't matter anyway, because there was nobody there either. I was taught by 5 women total. And so it was just kind of like, oh man, there really is not a whole lot of people. And of those 5, most of them were music folks, or were kind of pigeonholed into, oh, you're the dance tech. Right. On the visual staff. You don't teach the marching. The boys are going to teach the marching. You do the choreography, and kind of like just pigeonholed and typecasted into that role. And I don't know. I wish I had like some like that made me mad story of like, I'm gonna overcome, but it was just like, no, it was just like, this is what I want to do. And no one said no. So here we go. Like, that's just what I'm doing. And so I guess knowing that I may be one of the 5 for someone else, I always try to, be visible, be present, be a voice that they know, that they hear, make sure that the female members are just as highlighted and encouraged as anyone else, because they're just a member of the ensemble, just like everyone else. So yeah, and just making sure that, I guess, all of those members feel welcome, that they're not abnormal for being in a male space. Like, that's not what this is. It's not a male space. It's just a space. And right. Here we are. So yeah, I don't know if I necessarily have a good answer for any of it. I guess the best we can do right now is just keep encouraging, keep being present, keep saying things that need to be said.
I like what you said about highlighting for every member of your ensemble, because this isn't just a gender thing or anything like that. This is about all the participants in the activity, making sure that everybody feels valued and highlighted and an important part of the activity, making sure that nobody feels like they need to be pigeonholed into, you should really do this. If that's not what they want to do, like, support people pursuing their vision for it. And then I love what you said about just helping people understand the pathways that exist for them. There are no females on the snare line right now, but that doesn't mean that it has to be that way. If everybody else understands that there are pathways for them to go wherever they want, I think that naturally helps our activity and naturally helps all of our ensembles and all of our performers to feel valued and special and important in the activity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to ask you an extension question on this now, because I know that there are a lot of young women in the activity that are participating right now. We have a lot of fantastic performers that are there. And I know that there are a lot that might be considering becoming an instructor or a designer themselves someday. What advice, as somebody that's done this in the activity, in what is male dominated in terms of a lot of the instructors and the designers that are out there, what advice would you have for young women in our activity who aspire to be instructors or designers themselves?
I mean, put yourself out there. And I do have to preface all of this with, some of this is going to be advice that I struggle with. That, like, I don't always speak up when I should. And like, yes, that would be the advice that I would give someone, of just like, hey, yeah, you need to make your voice heard. Like, don't back away. But sometimes I do that too. And that's not, like you said, that's not a gender specific thing. That's just like kind of a societal thing, you know, like that's just kind of where we are right now. But yeah, I think just not being too afraid to put yourself out there, not being afraid to fail, and because that's all going to be part of it too. And that you do have something valuable to contribute. It's a different, you have a different voice. That's the point. And a lot of that needs to be heard and seen by the community, because it looks different, it feels different, it just is different, and that's okay. That's good. So I think just diving in as much as you can, and finding your tribe, like who's gonna support you, who believes in you and your vision and your thoughts, because they're going to be the ones that help you do what you want to do when you have those moments of doubt, of, was this the right thing? Is this the right direction? This thing that I believe so confidently is good, is it actually good? Those people will be there to really help you until you get a little more settled in yourself, in your voice, and your design and your process. And I barely feel like I've arrived at that point, and I'm over 30. You know, I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I'm still considered young in the activity. And I barely feel like I have that confidence that I can walk in and say, this is what I want it to be, and here's why, and I know this is right, and here's why. And approach it with that confidence. I've only recently been able to do that. And a lot of that was because other people were like, you need to stop doubting everything you're doing. It's good. What are you doing? So yeah, I think who you surround yourself with will matter a lot.
And man, is it powerful to hear that from a mentor or somebody that you look up to, when they give you that affirmation back, like, no, you're good. You've got this. There's something about this. So I think that's also such great advice. Just, if, for anybody that wants to pursue something in this activity, find some great mentors, hook up with them, and lean on them, have them build
ready and willing.
That network.
They're out there ready and willing to talk with people who want to get into this. Like I kind of accidentally, sort of, it's kind of a long story, stumbled into having Leon be my mentor overall. And so like, I'll just send him things and he'll tear it apart with love. Like, I know at the end of the day, he wants the best for me, which is why he's doing that. So like, there's people out there that exist who want to do that, because like I was saying earlier, you can't get a degree in band visual design. So how else are we furthering the future of our activity? We have to talk to people. We have to be open, as the younger folks, open to having our stuff kind of ripped apart and taking that advice in the loving way that it's being sent. And then the older folks in the activity, knowing that that's kind of part of their responsibility. That's like on their plate now, to kind of pass on the torch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lindsey, this has been fantastic tonight. I want to thank you for being so, gosh, honest and vulnerable and candid with us, and also just opening up the book on all of your experiences and background, and allowing everybody to really benefit from that knowledge and the experience that you've had working your way through the activity. And I'm sure with many years still on the horizon to accomplish even more great and amazing things. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for this, and for giving us all this great input to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And for everybody else, our next webinar is going to be coming up on Thursday, March 24th. That one is going to feature Travis Peterman. He is the director and creative designer behind George Mason Indoor Percussion. So really looking forward to chatting with him as well. I'm sure it's going to be another great conversation, hopefully just as good as the conversation that we were able to have with Lindsey tonight. Thank you very much for joining us for this. Lindsey, once again, thank you so much for sharing everything that you did tonight. And everybody else, we'll see you again down the road. Thanks.